Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonati. Today I'm going to do the second part of my favorite first lines of books mini-series. Basically, I recently went through like 500 books in my read collection and I picked out 30 books with first lines that I really liked for various reasons, and I'm sharing them with you now. This is the second batch of 10. The first part is also up, so you can go watch that batch of 10 if you feel like it. But no further preamble, I'm just gonna jump in and read some first lines to you and try to tell you why I like them, which is sometimes a little bit difficult. The first book in this batch is Yendi by Brust, which is the second book published in the Vlad Tolstos series, which is a fantasy series about a human assassin living in like an elvish empire. The elves are actually called Dhalgrens. And Vlad is one of the rare humans who lives and works with Dhalgrens. He has a lot of Dhalgren friends, and his interactions with them are a lot of the comedy gold in the series. But anyway, I really like the first line of Yendi, and it is, "Kragar says that life is like an onion, but he doesn't mean the same thing by it that I do." You just know that Vlad is gonna like rip into the Dhalgren way of thinking, or he's gonna talk about food, because Vlad's a foodie. He really likes cooking, so when he talks about onions, he probably means something different from, you know, a Dhalgren assassin. Anyway, I love the Vlad Tolstos books. Next up is Dark Orbit by Carolyn Ives Gilman. I read this some years ago and I want to say I did a review of it, so I'll link it if I did. And I think that I really like the first line of this because it falls into that category of first lines of science fiction novels or fantasy novels that immediately make me ask, why and how is this possible? I have to keep reading to know what is actually meant by the statement. In the course of Saraswati Calicot's vagabond career, she had been disassembled and brought back to life so many times, the idea of self-knowledge had become a bit of a joke. In the previous part, I talked about the first line of The Dispossessed by Ursula Guin, and I forgot to put A Wizard of Earthsea with that when I'm trying to keep books by the same authors together. This has a classic first line. I think it's really similar to a lot of first lines of fantasy novels in particular. It talks about setting and important places and the origin place, the birthplace of your hero or whatever, but I really like it, maybe because once again, it's attached to nostalgia and the fact that I read this many times when I was a kid. The first line of A Wizard of Earthsea is, "The island of Gaunt, a single mountain that lifts its peak a mile above the storm-racked Northeast Sea, is a land famous for wizards." And now that I've just read that, I think it's a bit interesting that the first line is about Gaunt rather than Roke, since Roke is actually the island where the school for wizards is. But this isn't about where wizards go to be trained, it's about where they come from and where they go back to. And Gaunt is one of those places that characters will think about and go back to many times in the series. I probably love it because of that. Now for something weirder and more difficult, Dhalgren by Samuel R. Delany. This is another one that I've read some years ago. I did a review of it, which I think is still actually pretty decent even now. This is one of those notoriously difficult and strange reads. It's very long, it's like 800 pages long. I did enjoy reading it, though I didn't like some things about the book. One thing that I still really appreciate about it is the way that it's written, and I think the first sentence is just, it tells you so much about the way Delany has written it and how he's going to use language and how weird it's going to be. So the first sentence of this is not actually a complete sentence. It is, "to wound the autumnal city." So it's actually the second half of a sentence. And if you want to get the first half, you have to read all the way to the end. Next up, I have 3 books by Terry Pratchett, which are all Discworld novels. I was really surprised when I read the first lines of all the Discworld novels and most of them were really similar to each other. I really thought that there would be more zingers, more hooks, more funny lines and stuff, but actually a lot of the Discworld novels begin with prologues that introduce Discworld again, you know, the turtle, Great Atuin with the elephants and Discworld on its back and everything. So they tend to open in pretty similar ways, or just like the opening paragraph is more interesting than the first sentence type of thing. But these three I really liked for varying reasons. The first one is Night Watch, which is one of the Commander Sam Vimes / Night Watch books. And I like this one because it says so much about Vimes, but also just what it's like to live in Ankh-Morpork. The attitude you have to have. Sam Vimes sighed when he heard the scream, but he finished shaving before he did anything about it. The Light Fantastic, which is one of the Rincewind novels, I believe. Haven't read it in years. Rincewind is not one of my favorite characters, but one of those lines that just sums up something essential about Discworld. The sun rose slowly, as if it wasn't sure it was worth all the effort. And the last one is Hogfather, which is basically Discworld's version of Christmas and Santa Claus. It's one of my all-time favorite Discworld novels. I also watch the movie adaptation of this every year for Christmas, and I'm pretty sure that the first line here is used verbatim as the first line of the movie, of like the prologue, and I love the way that it's just intoned in the movie. Everything starts somewhere, although many physicists disagree. You should really say that with a very deep masculine voice, which I can't do, but I love it. Next up is Unquenchable Fire by Rachel Pollack, one of the most unusual fantasy novels I've ever read. It's like based on tarot and spiritualism, and it's very weird, but it's also really brilliant. This is another one that I also did a review of, which explains a bit more of why it's so strange. But this one, I think, is about a perfect example of a truly compressed first line in a science fiction or fantasy novel that packs in so many details and assumptions of the world building and the alternate history that essentially it doesn't make any sense until you've read the entire book. And it's one that I actually came back and read like the first couple of pages of this book again once I'd finished the book to see if it made any more sense, and it did. So the first line is, on the afternoon of the Day of Truth, 87 years after the Revolution, Jennifer Mazdan, a server for the Mid-Hudson Energy Board, fell asleep and underwent a strange dream, one not found anywhere in the catalogs. And I swear that every word in this doesn't make sense until you have read more of the book. What's the Day of Truth? The Revolution? What timeline are we in? And this thing about strange dreams and catalogs, like official catalogs of dreams, why would you do that? Can you do that? Yeah, I love that first line. The second to last one here in this batch is A Wind in the Door by Madeleine L'Engle, which is one of my childhood favorites, let's say. This is the sequel to L'Engle's really famous book, A Wrinkle in Time, so it's the second book in the Time Quintet. And this has one of the very rare, unusual first lines that I actually have remembered over the years from when I read it as a child. I don't actually know what it is about this first line that has made it stick in my brain for close to 20 years, but it has. There are dragons in the twins' vegetable garden. And the last book for this batch of 10 is God's War by Kameron Hurley. This was Hurley's debut novel, and it's the first book in the Beldam Apocrypha series about a woman who is a bounty hunter on a planet where a religious war has been raging for a very, very long time. The first sentence is, Nyx sold her womb somewhere between Punjai and Faline on the edge of the desert. Doesn't that just tell you something about this woman and the world she's living in and the circumstances? It's not a pleasant world. And those are another 10 of my favorite first lines from books from my physical collection. Let me know if you liked any of these as well, and maybe what some of your favorite verse lines are. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back to talk to you again very soon, and until then, bye.